Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit. It is Wednesday, October 12th, 2022, coming to you from the Paris of the Midwest. I'm Jer Stays, and across the table from me is
Fletcher Sharpe.
Good to see you, sir.
Yeah, likewise.
Always, always. Now, we have a lot to go through. Even though Detroit City FC was off over the weekend, they did play midweek in a match that, you know what? Most of it, I thought we had a real chance. And man, when Hopino got that goal, and I was so glad to see Antoine Hopino get that goal against his former team, I sat there in the kitchen going, we could do this. And then my hopes were dashed in like a pair of goals in 3 minutes. Let's talk about that one. I don't think we expected Detroit City FC to win this one, but for most of the game, I think they played really well.
Yeah, honestly, I thought a 1-1 draw was like the most optimistic thing to happen. So I expected eventually Louisville would find a chance to tie it up. And they did in the 61st minute with Wilson Harris squeaking through and getting a goal. But yeah, Hopino's goal from Declan Wynn was a nice enough chance where they tried to play an offside trap on him, and he beat it. This game kind of had a lot of defensive errors, and every goal that was scored had a defensive error from somebody, which I know is like typically soccer, but like this one, they were very like pertinent. Dia for Louisville was busy trying to play the offsides trap instead of, looking for where the defender was with Wesley Sharpe, who also tried to play the offsides trap instead of, running around signaling for offsides. If they just maybe taken a step back further, they'd be in position to maybe stop the ball from going in as opposed to whining at the referee. On the flip side, Wilson Harris dribbled around Michael Bryant. Michael Bryant made a nice stab at the ball. Unfortunately, it was not nice enough, and the ball bounced off Wilson Harris's chest and back down with a nice fortuitous way for them. And instead of, recovering to say, oh, we got to get back on defense, he then turned to the ref to go handball, which let Wilson Harris take 2 more steps ahead of him and slot the ball into the net. And on the final goal by U.S. men's national team youth U19 captain Josh Winder, he just got up there and got a nice header in there. You got to put a body on him. I know that corner kicks are really about who wants it more than that. And yeah, he's like 17, 18, but you got to use old man strength and be like, you're just not going to beat me for the header. And no one did. And he showed that he very much can jump and got up there and got a ball in. So yeah, while it stinks, the 2-1 loss would not be my biggest worry from that. My biggest worry is in the 39th minute when Stephen Carroll committed a yellow card and promptly went to hold his hamstring. And it wasn't one of those moments where someone does a foul, they're like, oh, I'm hurt, leave me. Like, he clutched at his hamstring and immediately went right down, and he had to come off for Carl Ouimet. That worries me because unlike the last time he went down with an injury, there's not much time left in the season. So at least he can't, play back into it. It's really just here. So hopefully he can recover quick enough and it wasn't anything too serious, because missing him for these next 2 games was going to be very not good.
Yeah, I mean, for that first hour, I had this belief that maybe, just maybe, we could do ourselves a favor in the playoff position. But between Carroll and between the loss, things are out of our hands right now. And I think we need to be kind of smart with how we play Carroll against the Miami FC, which we'll unpack that in a minute. But when it comes to Carroll, would you, if he is close to ready, would you play him against Miami FC the Miami FC, because they want to be Ohio State, the Miami FC, or would you hold him for the playoffs?
Injury reports have like many different things. There's, the cleared, which is good to go. Hopeful, which means looking pretty good. Game time decision, questionable, doubtful, and out. If he is anything but hopeful or cleared, I would not play him. If you see him in the injury report where anything he's not hopeful or cleared to go, he is not playing. And I don't think he should play, because if you put out a center back who is not doing so great health-wise out there to go play, and he gets hurt again in a game that's going to be physical, because Miami is a very physical team, now you have 2 center backs that are out for most of the offseason in terms of training and trying to get better, coming into the year with, question marks. Carl Ouimet's going back to Indy 11, so like, I don't want the captain of your team to be coming off an injury with another center back at the same time. So I think if he's not good enough to go against Miami, he waits till the playoff game to play. But if he's anything above questionable, which would be probable, or good to go, then I think we see 5 put the armband on.
Because Detroit City FC hasn't been able to win games where they just needed to, like there were some games this season they just needed to win, they did not. Our fate isn't as much of our hands for the playoffs as it was. Right now, if the season were to end, we would be playing against what has turned into one of the more controversial teams in the league since we last talked, the Tampa Bay Rowdies. That's where we would seed now. It is entirely possible that we will play them in the playoffs. There's also been a lot of drama around Tampa Bay, specifically Laurence Wyke. What on earth is going on?
So in a game between Monterey Bay and Tampa Bay, at Monterey Bay, Tampa Bay won 2-1. And late in the 67th minute, Laurence Wyke, wingback / midfielder from England, scored a headed goal, and he turned towards the fans and towards the field and yelled expletive off with a fist bump. And he was very pumped up, and everyone was very charged up over there. Near the end of the game, there was a play where the ref had a drop ball, which is when they drop the ball and just let you just dribble it. Leo Fernandez, the captain for Tampa Bay, thought it was just a regular foul call. So when he saw a player from Monterey Bay skip away with the ball, he was confused. In his confusion, he decided to slide tackle the guy from behind and kick out his back leg, which is like an automatic red card, which started a bunch of issues at that point. The game had already been pretty contentious as is, but when that happened, everything kicked off. A very, very big issue. People were like doing the whole, we're going to fight, but not really fight in the field, where they puff their chests out and just bump each other. Like, what? You notice during that moment, White kind of walked into the huddle from somewhere far away. As he walked away, you see 4 or 5 people turn, like, what did you, like, the motion of, like, what did you say, or what has happened here? And as they're being held back, you see him kind of go with his hands up, like, what did I do? Which I call the McNulty special if you watch The Wire. Like, what did I do? So after the game ended, the head coach for Tampa Bay was very upset. He literally walked onto the field as the final whistle blew, walked by Monterey Bay's coach, uttered something at them, pointed at the players, pointed at the coaches, gave them the double bird salute, walked into the locker room. Around the locker room, there was a scuffle or a fracas amongst players. And in the ensuing fracas, something happened or was said. We don't know exactly what, because Monterey Bay, Tampa Bay, and the league have not explicitly said what it is. But it resulted in an investigation that took 8 days. And Laurence Wyke has now been suspended 12 games by the USL Championship, which is significant because it's the longest suspension handed down in USL Championship history. And I know people will mention, what about Romeo Parks when he got suspended for 6 months? While he was in the USL Championship when it happened, that was a FIFA suspension that USL said, because we are within this league, we have to say okay. So this is the longest suspension that USL has handed down to a single player for something, period. And it gets tricky here because everyone thought the situation was over, but instead Tampa Bay chose to appeal the situation. They feel that their player has been wronged. They feel that what happened was he was mimicking a celebration of a goal that he scored, which caused more of the fracas, as opposed to saying anything that was racist or hurtful towards another player. I have sources. I won't reveal what people have said, but I can say the general messages. I have sources throughout the league. I have one for Tampa Bay. I have one for Monterey Bay, because I'm a real journalist. And both sources, one says players were upset he did something. Another source says all the players over here for Tampa Bay, he didn't do anything offensive. So something definitely happened. It's really at this point up to the interpretation of who feels that way and who doesn't. The reason why this is important, again, as mentioned before, is Detroit right now, if the season were to end, would be playing against Tampa Bay. And if they're appealing it, I don't know if that means that Laurence Wyke can play while the appeal process is happening, or if it means he still has to sit out. My thing that I feel foggy about, and the only thing I will say on it is, while the league was very slow to act on it, 8 days is a long time to hand out for something like that. I feel like Tampa Bay had to know something was up, because Laurence Wyke had played or suited up in every single game that he was healthy this year. And the following game after Monterey Bay, when they went to play against Loudoun, he did not suit up. He did not make the 18, did not make the bench, did not play at all. So I feel like if you're doing that, you're very well aware something happened. Something had to have happened for you to hold out a player that's suited up for you every single game he's been healthy. I don't know. I'm not here to sling mud one way or the other, but it's a very, very odd situation that's occurring right now.
It's super odd and it's murky because of this very long sentences, but 2-sentence statement from the USL Championship that in part says that Rowdies defender Laurence Wyke violated the league's zero-tolerance policy related to any form of harassment or discrimination on or off the field. This is part of the frustration that I've shared before around transparency. Now, we've talked about injury reports. We've talked about contract signings. But when it comes to this, I feel like the NBA kind of models a good way to do this. Robert Sarver, the general manager of the Phoenix Suns, there was an in-depth, this is what he's suspended for. This is why. This is what we're doing. And I like that. And I like that transparency because it tells people what the line is. And it also sends a message to all the jerks out there that we are not doing this. And so, not to say that the NBA is perfect, but among the pro sports leagues, they tend to be among the most progressive with dealing with these sorts of issues because of their player makeup and their fan makeup. And I feel like that's more of the gold standard. This, and then the Rowdy statement, which feels very murky as well, leaves everybody sitting there going, what happened? It's really tough from a reporting point of view to say, okay, well, this is what makes sense or this is what happened, because we don't seem to know and nobody's actually sharing the details.
It's especially tricky because both sides feel so vehemently about it. Tampa Bay put out a very strong response, accusing the league of not doing their due diligence, acting without Tampa Bay player mission statements on the situation, and not even having audio or video evidence of that. Meanwhile, Monterey Bay felt so wronged by the situation. Their next game was against FC Tulsa in Tulsa. They informed Tulsa, we are not going to play in this game until they hand out what's going to happen to this player. We are not going to go and do anything with the league until this is taken care of. And FC Tulsa was like, okay. So the game against FC Tulsa and Monterey Bay got postponed until this week. So both teams felt so strongly about the situation that like something had to have happened. So I'm glad at the very least people weren't like nothing happened. People were like something happened, and whatever happened happened. I mean, whether someone thought it was racist, whether someone thought it was something else, whether someone thought it was nothing, I'm glad at least we know something happened as opposed to whether did something happen or did something not happen.
Something happened, but Fletcher, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but everything that's racist, if the only time you get punished for being a jerk like that, for being offensive, for being discriminatory, there has to be audio or video evidence, that's a really high bar to clear, man. Like,
I mean, there's a situation that hits closer to home in the USL League One, the now defunct Lansing Ignite USL League One team. They played 1 year. They had a player who was currently an ESPN Plus broadcaster, actually, who uttered a homophobic slur at someone in the fans of his own home stadium. No audio, just people's eyewitnesses of it. And USL League One was slow to act for a minute until they started losing sponsors. Lansing United had some people there. They had a coffee company that was very pro-LGBTQ+, and they were like, we're not going to sponsor the team anymore if you're going to let this guy stay around. So the league suspended him for a few games, I think 4. And then Lansing United went further. After one game was had, they decided to just mutually terminate his contract. So it's a USL thing. And I know that the whole USL soccer is getting kind of blindsided as well from the other side with NWSL, Sally Yates reports, which is a very, very draining situation to be happening, especially for those involved and those who are mistreated. So I understand why, as they're getting like lambasted on one side, they're kind of getting the same on the other. They might have taken their focus away from this towards that. And I understand that to some degree. To your point, if they're going to be a professional soccer league and not, NISA or something like that, where they're professional only really in name, you got to take care of this stuff sooner. It taking 8 days to have a ruling on this is like a problem. Either you have a ruling or you don't.
And then have such thin information around it. Fans deserve it. Like, players deserve this. Like, there are plenty of good crisis communications people out there. I could give them the number of 3 they could call right now that have national level experience. And I'm just here in Detroit, so I know they're everywhere, right? They could get somebody who would be like, okay, we need to address these problems. Because right now, I don't think this plays well at all. It's that squishy middle. What does this mean? What does this stand for?
Personally, the way I would like to see it rectified, and I know this won't happen at all because just I know it won't, would be, all right, Monterey Bay said this happened. Tampa Bay said this happened. Something happened. Now, the league should tell us like what happened. Maybe as impartial as possible, this player did this, and then leave it up to the people who are like reading and seeing whatever to say, all right, this happened. Is this actually racist? Is this maliciously racist? Is it unintentionally, like ignorantly racist? I did not know that was a bad thing. Or was it something else? I have a personal experience I'll touch on briefly. When I played soccer for Wayne State, for the club team, we had a guy from England who had not been in the U.S. for very long, who we were playing against another team in a scrimmage, and he made a racist statement, not knowing it was racist, about another player on the other team, because the player was a tricky type of player. And he didn't understand why me and a few other teammates were like, yo, you can't say stuff like that. Like, I'll let it pass this one time, but the next time I got to hit you. Like, I have to, because, like, you can't say stuff like that. And he's like, I'm sorry. And I let it slide, not because I'm not, against racism. I very much am. But, like, he'd been in the U.S. for, like, 4 months at that time. And, like, while, of course, he's over the age of 21, like, I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because I know racism, while at its core is the same thing all around. In certain parts of the world, certain things you might say here that are okay. Other things you might say somewhere else. It's like, oh, if you go to England and you ask him for a cigarette, it's very different what they would call it in the U.S. So
what did he say?
He called an Asian player, he called him a cheeky monkey because he was very tricky. And I was like, hey, can't do that because in this country, using a monkey towards an Asian person or a black person is like a very racist thing. And if he'd heard you and hit you in the face, I would have been like, well. So he's like, I'm sorry, that's not something we really think about over in England. And I'm like, I have struggled to believe that. But you know what? I know cultures are a bit different. I'll let it slide. Don't do it again. Just don't do it again. And he's like, got it. And from that point forward, he and I are fine. I understand there's a culture divide.
And Wyke is from England, correct?
He is, but I'd be less willing to look at Wyke in that situation because he's played for 3 teams in the U.S. He's been here since 2019, I think, 2018. So you've been here for a while. So you are familiar with culture and customs and such. So if it's something that he said or something he did that's along the lines of that, I'm not looking the other way. If it's something where, maybe he had a fist pump or something else that came out, sure. But if something where, he, made a statement about animalistic or something, no. You've been here way too long. You understand that's not okay. I think my biggest gripe with Tampa Bay's issues before we move on, it reminds me of Lance Armstrong when he got accused of steroids and he was like, I didn't take steroids. And the guy who was in that testing department that said I was positive, that guy's a crook, whatever, and he destroyed that guy's life. He vilified him. That guy had to move his family like 2 or 3 times. Then it came out that Lance Armstrong really did use steroids, but the damage was so done that the guy's life can be put back together. Whenever I see someone get accused of something and their response is like to go on the offensive, that's what I'm like, maybe you did this. Like, it makes me uncomfortable. Before, I was kind of in the murky, like, this actually happened? Was it misunderstanding? I know Monterey Bay has a few players that, like, I trust explicitly with certain things. But to see Tampa Bay respond in that fashion, then to see their coach after the game be so animated, I don't know. Like, maybe someone let something slip from the chamber they shouldn't have. And I'm not going to excuse it because, it was definitely said. But, maybe something did happen that you're hoping that we just don't, investigate further. So it's a very murky situation that Detroit might be walking themselves into come playoff time. The upside is they might get in some fans who want to just see Tampa Bay lose regardless.
Let's talk about that on the pitch impact if they lose Wyke.
He is a very, very useful player for them. 1 goal, 2 assists this year, but very, very versatile. Can play in the wing, can play in the midfield, can play a little bit in the center. Tenacious, as we saw in that one game against Monterey Bay. He really gets after it. When he tackles you, you feel it. He's not their best player, but he's a player that, like, aside from this unfortunate cloud hanging over his head, you'd want on your roster. So to have him not be there in a game that really might matter is a thing. When Detroit played them twice this year, in the win and the loss, he posted an average of 7.3 on the FOTMOB for a rating. Again, the average of a player rating is a 6. So to post to 7.3 is, like, pretty good overall. It means that the player contributed and was, like, noticeable. His name was said a few times on the broadcast. He did a few things that were positive, more positive than negative. So yeah, to not have a player like that on the wing could hurt, could help in terms of motivation. So we really don't know. We honestly don't even know if he'll be playing or not, because if they're appealing the suspension, the league might let him play while they're still processing the appeal. So we don't know how long it's going to take, given it took 8 days to actually pass something that might take even longer to finish the appeal.
Interesting. All right. The Miami FC coming to town this weekend in what is going to be an important game against the 7th place foe, because the USL Championship's Eastern Conference is a gigantic traffic jam from 4th place all the way to 7th place, with only 3 points separating Birmingham, Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Miami. So for many reasons, this isn't a must-win game, but it would sure be really handy if they did, because if Detroit City FC loses this, there's a pretty good chance they are going to be in 7th place, and then they'll have to go to Memphis.
Yeah, I would characterize it as a must-win game, especially if they want the home field advantage for their first match, because if Detroit wins against Miami and Birmingham and Pittsburgh either tie or lose, Detroit will leapfrog them in points for the season and go into 4th place, which will then have them host either Birmingham or Pittsburgh. If you just are happy to be in the playoffs, then sure, whatever. You just put out whoever you need to put out some of the younger players who don't play much, put out, players who might be on the bench. But if you really, really care and really want to be at this, you need to win this game. Because if you don't win this game, those situations are not happening at all.
Will that starting lineup tell you everything you need to know where Trevor's head's at on this one?
Yeah. If Stephen Carroll's not there, I'm going to assume that he's probably, hurt a bit. If I see Hopino, I'm assuming that they're really trying to go for it because he also left the game a bit early with a little bit of tightness, but I figured they'll have a chance to push him. I hate to say this because I don't want to sound like I'm picking on him. But if I see Pato starting against Miami, I'm certain that we're just going to do what we can. If I see Yazid up there to start, I think that they're trying to get this win and get through there. That really, for me, is an indication of like who's where. If I see Richard Foster on the wing or Cy Goddard in the middle, I think that they're just trying to get some players some game time before the playoffs start. So if I see the lineup they put out against Louisville, which was a serious one, Hopino, Matthews, Rutz, Declan, Jope, Maxey, Reese, Bryant, Carroll, and Lewis. If I see that lineup out there, I know they're trying to make sure they get the home field advantage. If I see any variant of that where a few players are out, I think at best they're just trying to, get their legs stretched out so when they go to Memphis or whoever that, they do something.
We don't normally get into this, but I think it's important, considering how tight everything is, to talk about the other matches that other people are playing. So we could kind of walk through who's Birmingham got.
Birmingham has Indy 11, which if they drop points, whether it means tying or losing, it helps Detroit. I don't see Indy 11 beating Birmingham. I don't. I don't want to say hapless because hapless is not nice, but they are not a very good team if you want them to score goals. They're kind of like that rough piece of steak where it won't kill you, but it's going to get stuck in your throat and it's going to be annoying as heck. And that's how Indy 11 plays. That's how they played when Trevor was in charge of them. That's how they play now. They have some exciting players. They got Solomon Asante when he left Phoenix Rising, and I thought he was going to come to the East and just tear stuff up. And he has not really had a great year for them. I think part of it has been acclimating to the league. Part of it's been, getting his visa rechecked from leaving Phoenix. But he just came and was very much But they still have some talent over there on that side. I just don't think they have enough talent to hang with Birmingham Legion, who, as I've mentioned many, many times, when they're not playing Detroit, they are an amazing team. When they play Detroit, I don't understand. I will say, though, looking at the team form, coming into this game, Legion have 1 win, 1 tie, and 3 losses. One of those losses was a 4-3 loss to Indy 11. So what do I know?
Right. Riverhounds, they have Oakland.
Yeah, they have Oakland Roots, and that's more of a game I think that they actually might lose. And that's mainly because Oakland Roots are fighting for a playoff spot out in the West. They need wins. They have 3 teams with 46 points, 1 team with 45, and 1 with 44, all from the 5 spot to the 9 spot. So you lose this game and other teams win, you might find yourself dropping from the 5th place out of the playoffs entirely. So everyone needs points. So I know Oakland's going to come out there really trying to score some goals. They have Carlson on loan from Venezia, who has come here and set the league on fire with 20 goals. He's a real striker. In fact, the last goal he scored in their last game was amazing. He got the ball in the top of the box, and it was almost like watching a little brother play against his smaller siblings, where he got the ball, they came, and he just said, "Get off me," and put the ball in the bottom corner. Literally just put his arm up. They tried to grab him. He just said, "Get off me." Took a turn and put it in the net. And I was like, yeah, that's bully ball. That's legit. That's a guy who really wants some goals. So I think they're going to struggle with his physicality. I know Pittsburgh puts the ball in the net, but they also get the ball put in their net many, many times. So if a player like that, who's a lightning rod in that way, I think he's going to cause them some issues. So if they lose, Birmingham ties, Detroit wins, Detroit's in the 4th spot, and people can celebrate and point and say how wrong I was about they wouldn't get a home playoff spot. But if none of those things happen, then I'm right and we're all sad.
Well, 538 gives an 11% chance for 4th place for Detroit City FC. I will mention, Oakland beat Legion recently. So Oakland's got some sauce.
Yeah, they beat them because of Carlson, who's, again, I hate to say because he's Icelandic, but he's a very tall, blonde-haired Viking. And in my opinion, honestly, when the Roots played Detroit, they tied. Had Carlson not just had his wife give birth to a child, they probably would have lost because Carlson would have made their defense struggle.
Before we wrap up the DCFC stuff, we want to talk about this Miami FC game. It was a draw last time we played. This is the big thing, and I hate to do this. What is your final season-ending prediction for Rouge versus the Miami FC?
If Stephen Carroll's healthy, a 2-1 win. Stephen Carroll's not healthy, I see a draw.
A draw doesn't get it done for DCFC, does it?
Nope. If they draw instead of win, they will be in the 6th spot, which is okay because they're in the playoffs, and that's better than not being in the playoffs. But if you're really trying to get that home field advantage, you got to win. I will mention the last game they played against them, Stephen Carroll was injured, so he was not able to play. So they had Devin Wamensa, Michael Bryant, and Carl Ouimet, and it was 1-0 for a majority of the game. And at the last second, they sent a ball into the box. Donajay Reed, the Canadian international, got free, put a little shimmy move on Bryant, who dove the wrong way, and then he slotted the ball home. Then Nate had a chance to get a hand on, but I think he just got wrong-footed. They have the ability to get the win if they really want to do it, but they just have to stay consistent at the back, and that's something we're always going to have to worry about with this team, especially in the back. They have a player like Kyle Murphy up top who can score goals at will. They got a few players from Tulsa who came over when Tulsa kind of imploded, who've been helping them out and making them stay steady. So you got to look out for their offense, but if you can find a goal and get it in there and just hold on defensively and play well and don't cheat, don't dive at the wrong play, and just stay within yourself and stay compact when need be, you can walk away with a win.
Before we go, I have a mailbag question for us. And as always, dailydetroit@gmail.com, or hit us up on the contact form linked in the show notes. We're always here for him. Michael from Hazel Park. Why do Jaron Fletcher never talk about the Lions? It's great you cover soccer, but Lions are what everyone wants to talk about. What do you have to say to Michael from Hazel Park?
One, that's 100% not true. That's 100% not true. I will say that we talk about soccer a bit more than anything else. And like there are some people who might not really care as much about soccer. But I assure you, the Lions are not what everyone's thinking about right now, unless they want to think about why they're so upset. And reason number two, SOL, same old Lions. I've said it many times in the show. I said it in person, said it to friends, said it to my father one day, but just same old Lions. The only difference between them and the Matt Patricia Lions is they have a coach who doesn't look like a curmudgeon on the sideline. That's really it. They have a coach who's like rah-rah and happy and wants to push you forward and give you all the confidence boost in the world, instead of a coach who looks like he ate a tuna fish sandwich that like the fish was still alive. That's the only difference between them. They're the same team for the most part. They still find ways to lose, whether it's coaching, whether it's players, whether it's whatever. They still find ways to lose. If they were a person being saved by like a firefighter hopping out of a building, they would hop back into the building. It's like, oh, I'm saved. Psych. I'm good. So like it's frustrating, and just everyone watched what happened. The one thing I do appreciate about the Lions is, unlike a lot of Detroit sports where it's like you need an analyst to break down what happened, the Lions, a 3-year-old could look up and say, I know why they lost. That right there, that's why. It's easy to not have to talk about it because we all see what the problem is.
I mean, there's hours and hours and hours of Lions talk. There isn't as much DCFC talk. We like soccer. We like DCFC. You know, the other thing I'd mention here is that I want to cover teams that are in the thick of it. Like we'll end up touching on a lot of things. I know we'll do a lot of Pistons this year, but we want to talk about teams that have something that are interesting to talk about. The NFL record for points against is 533 by the Baltimore Colts. That's back in 1981. It is entirely possible that the Lions, especially on like a 17-game schedule, could break that record for points against. The Lions are trash, and they're not coming back this year. There is no hope, and frankly, I've lost faith in Dan Campbell.
Yeah, people were getting on me like, you need to give him a chance. You got to stop being so negative. And I'm like, I used to coach youth league football. I used to coach soccer, youth league soccer. I see those coaches, the ones who are very excited and very happy and very whatever. They're like, yeah, we're going to go in there. We're going to do this. We're going to bite their kneecaps. And people are like, I love that. Now, they're not thinking about exactly like biology and how the body works, but if you're biting someone's kneecap, it's because they're kicking you in the face. Like, there's no way someone's foot is not by your face or your mouth is near their kneecap. So, like, that's great and all. You're biting someone's kneecap, but they probably punched it into your face like 4 or 5 times at that point. So, really, you're just doing the best to, like, hold on while you're being defeated. It's like watching a boxer who's like, I'm still okay, as he's on the ropes, like, his eyeballs falling out, like, I can't stand up. You're like, oh, I'm good. Bite his kneecap. That's what the Lions are to me. They got shut out 29-0 to a coach who people say is the worst coach in the league team's recent history. I don't need to say much more than that. They made a third-string quarterback look like Joe Montana. He threw for less than 200 yards, but they had the stadium chanting his name, and most of them didn't even know who he was.
You know, Michael is a devoted listener, so let's make Michael happy.
Figure out how to do the Space Jam technology and steal other people's talents. That's it. There's nothing that's going to save this season. You need to hope your young players grow into something special, like with the Pistons. Like, the Pistons are going to be bad, but like, we're excited about Cade Cunningham's growth, Jaden Ivey's growth, Jalen Duren's growth, watching Isaiah Stewart and younger players, watching them grow into like their roles. We're excited about that. The Lions, it's really Let's see if Jamal Williams can keep doing something. Let's see if DeAndre Swift can, recover and be well. Let's see if Aiden Hutchinson's really worth a second overall pick. But outside of that, maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown. Let's maybe watch him develop into being an all-pro receiver.
And he'll be an all-pro receiver with someone else at this pace.
I think, honestly, he'll be an all-pro receiver. He might just do what, Galladay did, where it's like, all right, I'm putting up numbers, and now I'm leaving because I want more money and a chance to win. If I'm not going to win, I want more money in a better city. Okay, fair enough. You know what? I'm not going to fault you in that regard. Whether you think Detroit's better than New York, that's your own thing. I don't personally, but some people might, and it's an easier way to make way more money. So at this point, it's just enjoy the young talent you have now, because they're not going to be winning any playoff games right now, and just hope that maybe in 2 or 3 years they figure it out when the new head coach comes in, because I don't see Dan Campbell lasting much longer if you keep making errors that cost your team to lose in this fashion.
Fletcher Sharpe, it's going to be so good to see you at Keyworth, if not possibly bittersweet, depending on how the gods of the beautiful game shine upon us.
I think it'll be a great game. Whether you are a soccer fan or not, I think it's going to be a very intense game. I think it'll be a very passionate one. Might be a little bit chilly, but I know there's still some tickets left. So if you haven't bought a ticket yet, if you haven't gone to a DCFC game this season, I highly recommend this being the one you go to, because you're going to see the players give their all to make sure they try to get a home playoff game, because even the players will acknowledge, while playing soccer is just playing soccer and you're playing a kid's game as a profession, you'd much rather do that in front of your own fans cheering your names to the fans booing you.
All right. Thank you for listening to Your Daily Detroit. I'm Jer Stays. Remember that you are somebody, and we will see you around town.